Targeting social skills in the IEP. In order to appropriately advocate for social skills in the IEP, you need to know what they are. Social skills are one component of social competence. Social competence consists of the ability to identify and apply the social, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral skills needed to successfully navigate interactions with others. Success in this area is essential to a life of independence. This includes day-to-day functioning, relationships with friends, parents, teachers, and anyone else we come in contact with. Social competence is directly related to a child's ability to make and maintain positive relationships with peers and adults. It can be categorized as the effectiveness and appropriateness of our human interactions and relationships. The effectiveness of our communication is how well we get our message across. The appropriateness of our communication is whether or not we are demonstrating the right skills at the right time and in the right order. Throughout the presentation, there are little tips like this to help. This is a direct citation from the US Code. Note, an IEP is designed to meet the student's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. The involvement of social competence in being a successful member of society. The personal knowledge and skills which persons develop in order to deal effectively with life's many choices, challenges, and opportunities. To be a successful social member of human society, there are many things one should know and be able to do. Simple things such as greeting someone in an appropriate way may be taken for granted by adults, but young children who are new to this society need to understand and acquire those social competencies. Social competence has been conceptualized as consisting of 6 categories of competence. Self-regulation, also known as emotional regulation. It consists of the ability to self-monitor and manage our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Someone who has a difficult time in this area may not demonstrate socially appropriate responses. They may have difficulties with transitions. They may perseverate on something that has upset them, and their inability to move on or be more flexible puts them in a state of mind where they are not able to benefit from their education. Collecting baseline data on reaction time is important to include in the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Sometimes a student will have a meltdown and be unable to respond to adult prompting. However, when provided with visual supports, they may be able to point to how they feel. This slide shows the zones of regulations. A student interview is a powerful tool. Often, students are able to tell us what's going on, but we just fail to ask. Ask the student what's going on in their brain when they're getting upset. Explain the internal thermometer. This slide shows the thermometer of a student who perseverates, who is unable to move on from an event that occurred that was upsetting to them. The pause is the time between the onset of a feeling and the action taken as a result of that feeling. If a student has impulsive reactions, his thermometer will rise much more quickly than a student who can stop, apply a strategy, and move on from an event. Produce a list of possible interventions Interventions do not need to be something the student does alone. If they need adult support, make sure it's written in the IEP. If the student is able to locate the pause and apply one of the strategies or interventions, their thermometer should be able to stay at a lower temperature. Interpersonal knowledge and skills. Behaviors and tactics a person uses to interact with others effectively. Communication, listening, and attitude. Making sure your message gets across. Positive self-identity. Developing healthy self-esteem. Making commitments to yourself. Maintaining structure. Being confident and recognizing your strengths and weaknesses. Liking yourself. Having values and taking responsibility. Having integrity. Being confident, but able to recognize you have weaknesses just like everyone else. Positive self-identity also includes disability awareness of oneself. Learning about your own disability assists you in learning about your own strengths and weaknesses. This leads to better self-advocacy in times of need. Many students require a form of structure during the day. Creating a schedule is a helpful way to increase structure and the student's ability to predict what is going to happen, giving them a sense of control. To the maximum extent appropriate, the student should have some involvement in creating it. Cultural competence. Being able to understand and interact with people across cultures. Being aware of your worldview and showing respect when another person's differs. Developing a positive attitude and awareness of another person's culture. Respecting other people's thoughts and beliefs, even when they differ from yours. Social values. Values reflect our sense of right and wrong. They help us to create the future we want when we apply them to decisions we make in daily life. Sometimes new life experiences may change values we previously held. For kids who have experienced trauma, this can be especially challenging. Individual values reflect how we live our life and what we consider important for our own self-interests. Individual values include enthusiasm, creativity, humility, and personal fulfillment. Relationship values reflect how we relate to other people in our life, such as friends, family, teachers, managers, and coworkers. Relationship values include openness, trust, generosity, and caring. Social values reflect how we relate to society. Social values include justice, freedom, respect, community, and responsibility. Planning and decision-making skills. Making informed decisions. Identifying critical factors that will affect the outcome of a decision. Consider the amount of risk and uncertainty when making decisions. Evaluate options and consider priorities. Practicing a cognitive strategy when making decisions that are important helps a student develop flexibility in thought and be less impulsive when making decisions. Functional skills are required under federal law to be considered as equally as academic skills. They are critical to achieving optimal independence. Social competence is a functional life skill. Socially competent young children have been described as those who engage in satisfying interactions and activities with adults and peers. While satisfying interactions may differ from person to person, meaning my definition of a satisfying interaction may be different than yours, there is one thing in common. They are both effective in whatever capacity they need to be. The role of pragmatic language in effective communication. Pragmatic language refers to the social language skills that we use in our daily interactions with others. This includes what we say, how we say it, our nonverbal communication, such as eye contact, facial expressions, and body language, and how appropriate our interactions are in a given situation. There are several parts to pragmatic language. We will break each of these down in the following slides. However, I will provide the definitions first. Initiating, knowing how to begin a conversation, how to ask for help, how to self-advocate, how to ask for directions. Topic maintenance, the ability to be in conversation and remain on topic, and to understand that what you may be thinking is not known by the other person. We call this implied knowledge. Gaining attention, understanding and applying the need to secure a person's attention before beginning to speak with them. Communication repair, the ability to recognize a breakdown in conversation and change your behavior to repair it. Rephrasing information when the other person doesn't understand, or increasing your volume when they can't hear you. Perseverance, recognizing when your message is not getting across and adjusting the delivery of that message, making sure the listener understands the message. Perspective taking, the ability to understand other people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Recognizing social behavior and understanding implications. Gaining attention. Gaining attention is important because it secures the listener's attention. Initiating. Self-advocacy, giving a compliment, offering help, introducing yourself, asking for help, and asking someone to play are all part of initiating a conversation. Topic maintenance. Students who are easily distracted struggle with topic maintenance. There's a visual below called Keep the Train on the Track. Using this can often help a child understand why we need to stay on track, why we need to take turns. It shows the listener you are paying attention. Communication repair. The ability to recognize a breakdown in conversation and change your behavior to repair it. Recognizing looks of confusion, recognizing your own confusion and seeking clarification. Recognizing when the person misheard or misunderstood. Responding with increased volume or speaking more slowly. Perspective taking. The ability to understand other people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Recognizing social behavior and understanding implications. This also consists of the ability to see where a person is coming from or understand why they would feel a certain way. Children who struggle with this don't have a gray area. They exhibit what we call black and white thinking. In other words, they see right and wrong and nothing in between. Perception is reality, how we see things. Perceptual skills include recognition, insight, and interpretation. Perseverance. Often when a student's message is not getting across and they feel the listener is not understanding, they give up. However, when you teach a student to persevere, you build their confidence. They gain a sense of feeling heard. Instead of giving up, the student should be flexible, repeating the message in a different way, using different words, phrases, or gestures. Signs of problematic pragmatics: difficulty interacting appropriately, difficulty joining in social play, difficulty working with peers, and difficulty keeping friends. This visual shows what happens when social deficits go unaddressed. They lead to social isolation. Anyone who has ever heard of the school to prison pipeline understands what this visual is showing. These problems lead to academic problems, which cause anxiety and negative behaviors. This leads to bullying, skipping school, and drug use. Answers lead to arguments. Some of your best arguments can come from the staff's own words, if you ask the right questions. Does the student have friends? If the answer is no, it's your job to find out why. Does the student have a difficult time working with others? The ability to work with other people is a necessary functional skill. It doesn't matter which field you end up working in. There will be some interaction with others. Ask the teacher how the student performs during group work. Students who struggle with pragmatic language often struggle to work well in a group setting. Ability versus application. Goals should include the application of skills in a real-world scenario, not just the demonstration of something in a hypothetical situation. Example: I don't care if Johnny can respond appropriately when Miss Schnozberry asks him how he would respond to a situation. What I care about is whether or not Johnny can actually apply that skill. Instead of having a goal end in a hypothetical situation, make sure it ends with the application. For example, if a student has a goal to initiate conversation, knowing that the goal is achieved should not be dependent upon a hypothetical situation. That student should involve himself in real-world scenarios. It would be a good idea for the special educator to have the student walk around the building and initiate conversations with people he doesn't know. That would be a demonstration of the application. Remind the IEP team, in all areas of both academic and functional need, the goal is always optimal independence with the fewest supports possible. Accuracy is important when analyzing data. Make sure you ask if the student has been provided with any support, including visual and verbal cues. Testing pragmatic language. Results of pragmatic language testing will often fall in the average range, even when a deficit exists. Point out that pragmatic testing only speaks to the student's possession of knowledge and not the application of skills. Pragmatic testing is done by a speech and language pathologist. If they are already doing the expressive or receptive language testing, ask them to also include pragmatics. Remember that behavior is communication. Not all students can be expected to articulate exactly what they're feeling in a given moment. It's important that people set clear expectations, provide structure and consistency, collect data on the response to those things, reinforce good behavior, give choices, and avoid power struggles. Beware of Judgemental and the arbitrary standard. Manifestations of disabilities are often viewed as choice. Teachers will often say a student can but won't. In the eyes of the law, arbitrary means based on individual discretion rather than a fair application of the law. When a teacher says that a student can but won't, they are applying an arbitrary standard. They are basing that belief on their individual discretion. Remember, what looks like one thing may really be another. What looks like sloppy and inconsistent work may really be an inability to self-monitor. What looks like unwilling or lazy may really be a need to learn a cognitive strategy. Ask the IEP team why they believe the behavior is a choice. Explain some disabilities may look one way while others look another. In all cases, students should establish a relationship with their teacher. However, for students who have experienced trauma, the need to establish a relationship with those they see on a daily basis is extra important. Before school begins for the year, set up an IEP meeting. The school may suggest attending back to school night for the student to meet his teacher. However, that will not suffice. These students need a private space, free from distractions, where the teacher is able to provide the student with a few minutes of undivided attention, letting them know that should they get upset when they are at school, they can trust them to come to them. Thanks for watching.
And Stephanie, these resources, these look really helpful. Are these things you created, or is there an amazing website that we should be that should be on our radar? And it looks like this is something that could be used in the explicit teaching of some of these skills. Is that correct?
Sure, yep. So one of them did come from a Pragmatic. It came from a speech pathologist friend. But then, see, these ones came from, I think it was Indiana University. I did have on the bottom, I don't know why you can't see it, but it says like courtesy of, I want to say it's Indiana University. Yeah, I can send you the link, but they have a ton of different visuals and resources on there. And I actually have so many more that I'll add to it. It was just getting the deadline met for this, so.
Yeah, these look amazing. And Stephanie, would this be a good place to ask too? So given, as you were going through the different categories and how, deficits in these areas impact a range of functioning in the classroom and at school, would it be correct to say that, part of the entire package to address these needs may include speech therapy, but that would certainly not be the end of, like, the end all and be all of addressing these things? Could you talk a little bit about, in IEPs that you've seen that have successfully addressed some of these issues, what have been some great services or accommodations that have been put in place?
Social skills group, a lot of schools do have them already, but if they don't, then I would try to get one. They can absolutely buy a curriculum for social skills. Like I said, they should have one already, but there are plenty of schools that I've gone into and they end up having a social skills group. And I don't mean lunch bunch. I mean actually formally teaching the students how to interact and practicing those interactions. The lunch bunch is a great thing to have initially, but if the student is not engaging and benefiting, then clearly they need more. And you use that lunch bunch as the RTI, the response to intervention. If they're not improving in their social skills, you have to take that data. You have to have the baseline data that when the student is in the cafeteria initially, they are not interacting with peers. And then you put them in the lunch bunch and you either see that they are benefiting a little bit or they're not. And then if they're not, then we need to move to something much more specific, which would certainly be the direct instruction from the speech and language pathologist in that area of pragmatic language. And that's something like Superflex is a good one. The Michelle Garcia winner, the Superflex is something that I've put in, I don't know how many elementary schools, because it really helps with the visual piece, and it gives the kids something that they can relate to. It's kind of fun. Like rock brain is when you're stuck and you're fixated on something. Glass man is when you are easily offended. And you can actually, so instead of, it's really not putting that ownership on the child in the moment. It is allowing them to say that, oh yeah, maybe that is happening. Maybe I do have rock brain. Maybe I should be a little more flexible, but it really, I mean, her stuff is great. And Superflex is not even very expensive for schools. I want to say it's like $75 for the curriculum.
Yeah, and I love the link to, like, one of your very first visuals was about the zones of regulation, and how in the uppermost zones where the child is least regulated, one of the solutions is I need help. And I was going to say, definitely don't forget about the power of co-regulation. When we're thinking about a kid who is stuck or who is dysregulated, you know, sometimes our response is to say, okay, go over there until you can be calm and have it together. But one of my kiddos this year, we had some specific strategies in place in his IEP that ended up working beautifully. So his teacher just kind of on her own, it wasn't in the IEP, but when he was dysregulated this year, she had like a printout of emoji faces, and they would together, like, she would show it to the child and he would pick out which emoji face he was feeling at the time. And also they had a strategy where, you know, she would hold his hands and look into his eyes, and they would start a breathing exercise together. And then, you know, by the end of the year, he really doesn't need the prompting anymore. Maybe with a verbal cue or just adult proximity, he's able to get there.
Sure, it's definitely about teaching the strategy. I mean, that's the thing though. If they don't have the strategies, you don't want it to be that the teacher has to do that forever. You want to teach the strategies, and that has to be in the IEP, because when they're saying, well, you know, he will calm down or he will do this. Well, how is he going to do it? You have to teach him how to do it, and then identifying that in the IEP. Don't let it just be counseling services where the student just goes to the counselor whenever they're upset. One, that's a loss of instruction because they're leaving the classroom so many times a day. Or if you can use as an argument too, those times of upset, you measure that time. So if you're looking at 10 minutes a day, that would be a very quick meltdown, then that's 50 minutes a week. And then you show them the numbers, you add them up, show them the numbers. That's a loss of instruction. So they need to do something to fix it.
That's a great idea about measuring the amount of upset time.
Yeah, I made a lot of them. The stories though, these were put in, they were specifically listed under trauma. And so I put them in. I don't know if they'll be beneficial or not to what you guys see, but
okay. Stephanie, can you say again, Superflex, was that the name of the curriculum you referenced?
Superflex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think that you can actually probably Google Superflex and then go to images, and you might be able to see like a whole, all of the characters laid out. And it really, I mean, it's such a good one. You could even effectively probably show, you know, a child at home this chart and go over them. And I mean, it really is helpful. I have found it anyway to be incredibly helpful. When they get to the older ages and you're in middle school, then there's a different curriculum, but when they're younger, they really need something to relate to. And then when you were speaking about the smiley faces, so we have found that yes, they are good for the younger kids. However, it is much better to use still shots or pictures of human beings, not cartoons, because they really have that rigid thought pattern. And so you know, somebody that's sad has this clear frown on them if you're using these smiley faces. But that's not always the case, right? Sometimes you have to be picking up on the social cues. That's what we need to teach through the pragmatic language. So it sort of isn't the most helpful thing, but in the moment it certainly is. So
Gotcha. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm going to turn my light on, but go ahead, Diane.
Hi, thanks. You know, I've been a CASA for, in my 6th year of CASA work. So I feel like I've been around a bit and, you know what I'm doing and understand how to advocate and form relationships with other members of the service team. But what this presentation is really making me realize is when I think that every single case I've been on, I don't believe I've had a child without an IEP. And so I've sat in many IEP meetings, and as a CASA and non-professional in this realm, I have to admit, it's striking me how passive I am when I read through the IEP, and there's just a presumption that they know what they're doing and this is what's done. And my second thought is how many of the, when I flip through IEPs, I tend to sort of begin to glaze over because they tend to be pretty boilerplate. And so what you're introducing to me, and I imagine if there's other people here, you know, I'm sharing the thought, is I have to admit it's never dawned on me to question, to actually enter into a discussion at the IEP meeting. And just simple questions like, you've said a couple things like, do they not want friends, or do they not know how to get friends? You know, things like that, like just to question. Or you've just done a couple different prongs that I suspect won't necessarily be applicable until we have that detail of a case. A lot of what you're saying is just making me think about things rather than know, oh, right, I can do that or that, but just to bring in the thinking. So to bring it to a question, when one asks, well, what about this or what about that? Or you said about the having the notes in advance so that they could be more focused and not get stymied in the middle of class and stop learning. When we ask for twos like that, you know, hey, this is what about this or that, and there's resistance, like, well, that's too much, or can we do that? Where's the line? Can you provide some general guidance in terms of, and maybe you said this, but I didn't absorb it. What is it, the pushback? You know, just how much we're entitled to ask for in a polite and, you know, a conversational way, not demanding, but if there's pushback, well, that's a bit too much, or that would be exceptional to do. Just some guidance on how to effectively engage in a collaborative discussion at the IEP meeting, but just, you know, being a little bit more provocative rather than passive, which I'm realizing I'm uncomfortably realizing that even at this point in my CASA career, I'm somewhat guilty of.
So there's a couple different things. One, I'm sure you know about a FAPE, the Free Appropriate Public Education. And I had asked Christy, I know that, you know, a lot of the people attending have already been present for 4 other presentations. So I didn't really want to spend any time instructing on the law and how to get the IEP or what really should be in it. But absolutely, it has to be really meaningful. That IEP better be bulky is what I would say. I mean, as far as the pushback, you have every right to advocate for something that the student needs in order to benefit from their education. When you say to an IEP team that the student is not capable of following along, taking notes, and remembering the information, because, you know, the kids that have that ADHD piece, right, that it's the working memory, but we're going to expect them to be performing. You can't have this expectation of a student if you're not giving them what they need in order to present that knowledge. I mean, it's part of the faith. I mean, I think that my question is, do you mean how far until you end the meeting and just maybe go to compliance? I wouldn't spend forever arguing with an IEP team. I would go to compliance. They don't have as much authority. It is please, I respectfully disagree. Please document my disagreement in the prior written notice. You take that prior written notice, you can either write a letter of demand to the school, to the compliance officer, wherever you are. And I know they're called different things in different states, but it is the supervisor of special education really that oversees making sure that everybody is complying with the law. That's a very straightforward thing. So if you're asking, that shouldn't be hard. I don't know why somebody would say that it's hard. Maybe, they have to print something or email something, but we're not asking for a lot here. You tend to get pushback when you're asking for, and I always do the parent communication part because that's also part of the IEP. Then I want updates every 2 weeks on what, if we're, depending on the disability and the student, of course, if it's a student with dyslexia and he's in a reading program and he has behaviors, then I'd like an update every 2 weeks about what he's learning. One, so that it can be used at home too. You can practice using those things at home. And then two, the behaviors, how often a teacher is observing the behaviors. Again, that data is iffy because everybody has their own opinions about what something looks like. And that's what an FBA really is. It's all of these teachers checking off whether or not the student is paying attention. How do you know? I know that some kids can pay attention when they're not looking at the teacher, but other teachers may mark that the student was not paying attention if they didn't engage in whole body listening, but they never checked to see if they, actually understood the material. So you get this FBA that's created that's not accurate. And now I'm not talking about the ones that are done by, qualified professionals. Those can actually produce amazing results and come out with great interventions. But the part that I get pushback on is when it's time consuming. So I want a Google document really, and that's easy to me. You put each class, science, English, whatever, right? The parent can access it and see it whenever they want to. So that's great. And that suffices something there. And I know that for the CASA advocates, that might be a little bit different, and it's not parents looking at it, but you can still, of course, as an advocate, be getting that communication. That's how you can advocate for the student. So, and I'm not sure about the, Christy, do you take over? Do you have meaningful, are you in the parent's position? Do you have the same rights then as the parent, as the CASA advocate?
No, that's a good question. So until parental rights are terminated, the parent should still be invited to the IEP table, although in the state of Virginia, the foster parent can sign the IEP, and a lot of times they act kind of in the role of the parent. And a lot of times it's the advocacy of our foster parents that really, even sometimes like when I as CASA am asking for an IEP eval and trying to push that, a lot of times the foster parents are much more successful at that even than I'm able to be and get that moving quicker. But Diane, just to throw out some thoughts in relation to your question, I would say this is a place where we bring some of our advocacy skills that we hone at other tables to bear here as well. So for one thing, we know that while we may not be an expert on the school process or IEP process, it is our role and our job to be an expert on that child. And for parents, this is even more true. You are the expertiest expert that there is on your child. So you absolutely should be reviewing services or needs of your child with that eye. And even be thinking about, I've recently experienced this and it was a very positive experience, like make sure that you are requesting copies of the data that the school uses, like the assessments that they do to determine eligibility. Make sure that you ask for that at least 48 hours ahead of time. That is in compliance with Virginia DOE regulations. You should have that data ahead of time, as well as the parents and whoever else is going to be participating for the child in that IEP meeting to review. Because again, for those of us who aren't working in that field every day, it is dense data. It takes a while to go through. We may have to look up terms or tables and what does the score even mean, etc. Also, you should ask for a copy of the draft IEP a day or two ahead of when it'll be finalized at the meeting. So in addition to you reviewing it, depending how old the child is, this is where you can use that relationship with the child. You know, if they're old enough, you can maybe go through some of it, the document with the child, say, hey, how do you feel about these potential accommodations? Do you feel like this will work well for you? Is there anything else in here you'd like to see? You know, if they're not old enough to go through the document, just have a conversation, a more informal conversation with them. And if the child is old enough to participate in the meeting, then make sure that you are taking the role of amplifying their voice and passing the microphone to them, you know, injecting at certain points in the meeting, pause points to say, hey, how do you feel about that? What do you feel is an area of strength for you, etc. Also, we know too from other areas of advocacy, just because you ask for something doesn't mean you're going to get it, or it doesn't mean that you're going to get it the first time. But for me, I always see a no as, okay, I need to do more research, gather more data, find out more about their no and what would it take to create buy-in. You know, I feel like a lot of this is similar to, you know, we know foster care kids tend to be over medicated. And sometimes I've heard social workers or other case professionals say, well, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't feel, you know, like I have a right to question the meds a child is getting. But we as CASAs bring the common sense perspective. So if we see that a 5-year-old is on 5 psychotropic meds, we can say, whoa, that seems like a lot, just from a common sense perspective. Similar thing, we bring a common sense perspective and knowledge of the child. And again, especially if we are able to go in and do observation in the school and just have really good ongoing communication with wherever the child is living, their home setting, and also in the school, we're going to come with a lot of data, and we're going to see how the living, breathing document of the IEP or 504 matches up with the child's needs. And I think a very important question in your toolkit always, whether it's the IEP table or an independent communication with school personnel, is, hey, from what you're seeing, is this IEP 504 or whatever the child currently is or is not getting, is this meeting the child's needs right now? Because a lot of times that classroom teacher will say, oh, I think he also needs this support. Or the speech therapist will say, I think his speech therapy needs to be bumped up in frequency per month or something like that. Does that
no, I think that, again, as I was making, you know, that a lot of this has got details that you have to have a case that it's specific to. But in general, and I can see from the comments that are coming on the chat, others are agreeing with me, just the license to be a little bit more of an advocate at the table and not just presume that this is the way it's done.
I would say, you know, use that respectfully. I disagree. Please note my disagreement in the prior written notice, because when they're marking that prior written notice, then they're going to put, I mean, you're going to request it because you've requested now that they include in the prior written notice that they are denying you the notes that you're requesting. So they have to give you this feedback. Why did they make that decision? What did they consider when making this decision? And a lot of times they reconsider when you do that.
Okay. And we did get training, previous trainings, all about the IEP and the legal process. I wasn't really, you know, that wasn't my question. It was more just the right to give voice, but thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, and that was why I had a question, because typically a parent would have meaningful participation, and that's what the argument would be. And you have a very strong argument for the meaningful participation piece when you are pushing that, but that would get tricky. And I don't know about that, the CASA part and what ownership, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, and we are going to go ahead and transition to our second part of the training. If you think of additional questions for Stephanie, for Stephanie number 1, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Dr. G, she is having some tech issues as well where she is. Her internet broadband is, you know, very spotty. So what I'm going to do is to share with you my screen where I see you now. Did you want to give it a try live, or do you still want to go ahead and play the presentation?
Why don't you go ahead and play it, because I'm not 100% sure. By the way, we just got 8 inches of snow today, which is more than 2 years in DC. So I'm up in Vermont. So I think when the weather's bad, the internet gets even worse. So I apologize, everyone, but feel free to stop, and I'll try to answer questions, as they come up, or I can answer and make comments in the chat as well. So, but yeah, hopefully it'll work for Christy to just play my slides. And I just threw this together, so I apologize. I haven't even had a chance to watch the whole thing myself, but feel free to ask questions, and hopefully I'll still be on. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And I just resent the notes from both the social skills piece and also from the executive functioning piece. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, and you know what? Hang on. I need to share my sound as well. And then go ahead and pop questions that you have into the chat as always. And I'll pause. Hopefully, if I can manage to do it at correct points to catch your questions. And someone, I don't think there's sound yet, but there's going to be in a minute. There was sound the first time I did it. Let me see. Hang on 1 second, guys. And again, as always, for those who haven't participated before,
Hi, I'm Stephanie Gerstenblatt from Enhancing Your Strengths. I'm going to be addressing executive function and trauma in school.
sorry, guys, now my tech is freaking out. Give me 1 second.
So we'll start with what are executive functions. I'm just going to provide you with a very basic overview. So just to start off, we aren't born with executive function skills, but we build them over time. Developmentally, the area of the brain that controls executive function doesn't really achieve full maturity until a person's in their mid-20s. I'm going to show you that, as you can see, there are many definitions of executive functions, and experts have come up with their own different ways for dividing them. For simplicity, I like the yellow definition. And that reads, skills that enable us to navigate through everyday life by helping us organize, plan, and manage life tasks. So here I'm just going to give you a really basic definition of executive functions. These are how the brain helps us to execute tasks. Executive functions enable us to plan, organize, remember things, prioritize, pay attention, and get started on tasks. It's also the ability to regulate thoughts, emotions, and actions, what we call self-regulating. Executive functions take place in the prefrontal cortex, or the frontal lobe. This is the area of your brain that's located behind your forehead and takes up 1/3 of your brain. So we get information and sensory input from different parts of our brain. Think of the different instruments in an orchestra. They play different parts at different volumes and in different tones. So the frontal lobe is the part of the brain that pulls everything together into a united symphony. It's the conductor or the manager. Also, like you can consider in another realm, an air traffic controller. Executive functions take place in the prefrontal cortex, or the frontal lobe. This is the area of your brain that's located behind your forehead and takes up 1/3 of your brain. So we get information and sensory input from different parts of our brain. Think of the different instruments in an orchestra. They play different parts at different volumes and in different tones. So the frontal lobe is the part of the brain that pulls everything together into a united symphony. It's the conductor or the manager. Also, like you can consider in another realm, an air traffic controller. So there are a lot of perspectives, definitions, and lists of executive functions, but they all basically get to the same point of helping us execute tasks. Now, I got this from Peg Dawson and Richard Guar's book, Smart But Scattered, which is a really popular book. And if you don't have it, I highly encourage you to consider reading it. So there are 2 dimensions, which include cognition or thinking, as well as behavior or doing. So under the cognition skills, you'll see under both lists, you'll see there are green skills and there are red skills. So the green are the foundational skills. These are the ones that develop earlier in life and are the building blocks for the red skills, which are the advanced skills. And those emerge later in life in middle school and high school and beyond. It actually takes 25 years for executive function skills to develop. And before they're developed, kids need their parents and teachers to act as their surrogate frontal lobes. So it's our job to ensure that kids grow their executive function skills. These are the skills that underlie school success. Next, I'm going to provide some questions that you can think about regarding your children's thinking and behaviors, which are specifically related to school. And I'm going to follow up with the skills that they're connected to. So think about whether your child follows classroom rules. Do they handle conflicts with peers without getting into physical fights? Do they calm down from an emotionally charged situation when prompted by an adult? And can they resist saying hurtful things when they're with their friends? So I'm just going to read these questions to you in case some of you, I know how it is on Zoom and sometimes it's hard to watch every slide. So I'll just share these and hopefully you won't mind. So these skills related to, or the questions related to response inhibition. This is the capacity to think before you act. This is the ability to resist the urge to say something or do something that allows us time to evaluate a situation and think about how our behavior might impact it. So for younger kids, this is the idea of waiting a short period of time without being disruptive. For older kids, adolescents, they may be able to accept a referee's call without an argument. So does the child remember after school and weekend activities, events, and responsibilities? Do they remember to do assignments? Do they bring school materials to and from school? Can they remember multi-step directions given sufficient time and practice? These are related to working memory, which is the ability to hold information in mind while performing complex tasks. So if you think of a young child, they should be able to hold in mind and follow 1 to 2 step directions. Whereas there's a lot more expectations of middle schoolers where they're expected to keep in mind the multiple expectations of multiple teachers. In online learning, we saw this was really challenging, where children have to remember where to find their Zoom links, where to find their homework on Classroom or wherever it's posted. Sometimes teachers even post them in different places, which can be incredibly difficult to remember. Remember to do their homework and then remember to turn it in and where to turn it in. Does the child recover quickly from a change of plans? Do they tolerate criticism from an adult? Do they calm down quickly when they get upset or excited? This is the skill of emotional control. This is the ability to manage emotions in order to achieve goals, complete tasks, or control and direct behavior. So a young child should be able to recover from disappointment in a short period of time. This is particularly difficult for trauma victims, especially when triggers arise. Teenagers should be able to manage the anxiety of a game or a test and still perform. Does the child get stuck on things? Do they recover quickly from minor disappointments? Are they able to shift gears when plans change? And are they able to do open-ended homework assignments? This is the skill of flexibility, or the ability to revise plans in the face of obstacles, setbacks, new information, or mistakes. It relates to an adaptability to changing conditions. So as you know, we all had to be flexible over the past year. So for young children, they need to be able to adjust their plans or to a change in plans without major distress. For high school students, they should be able to accept an alternative, such as a different elective class when the first choice is not available. Does the child spend adequate time on homework assignments? Are they able to maintain focus in the classroom? We call this sustained attention. This is the capacity to maintain attention to a situation or task in spite of distractibility, fatigue, or boredom. Does the child follow 3 to 4 step routines that have been practiced? Can they complete 3 to 4 classroom assignments in a row? And are they able to make and follow a nightly homework schedule without undue procrastination? This is called task initiation, which is the ability to begin projects without undue procrastination in an efficient or timely fashion. Does the child finish one task before beginning another? Do they carry out a homework assignment with various steps? And can they research for school or something of interest? This is the skill of planning or prioritization. This is the ability to create a roadmap to reach a goal or to complete a task. It also involves being able to make decisions about what's important to focus on and what's not important. So a young child with coaching should be able to think of options to settle a peer conflict. And a teenager should be able to prioritize which homework to do first. Does the child maintain notebooks and folders, not just the paper ones, but also virtual folders? Do they lose personal belongings? Can they keep track of and complete assignments? And do they have a neat workspace? As you can imagine, this is organization. This is the ability to create and maintain systems to keep track of information or materials. And of course, this is important as are all the skills, but especially important at home and at school, especially now during online learning. Does the child complete homework and tasks in a reasonable amount of time? Can they use a planner or calendar? And not only can they, but do they? Do they spread out studying for tests and completing long-term projects? This is called time management. It's the capacity to estimate how much time one has, how to allocate it, and how to stay within time limits and deadlines. It also involves a sense that time is important. So for a young child, they should be able to complete a short job within a time limit set by an adult. A high school student should be able to create a schedule to do homework, study for tests, complete long-term projects. Does the child try more than one solution to get to a goal? Do they increase their effort to improve performance? And do they practice without reminders to improve a skill? So this could include practicing an instrument or a foreign language. This is goal-directed and self-persistence, and this really varies by age. So for kindergarten, they may be trying to complete a task in order to get to recess. For a teenager, they may be trying to save money over time to buy something. This is a late developing skill. It goes all the way through high school and college. So this is the capacity to have a goal, follow through to completion of the goal, and not be put off or distracted by competing interests. Does the child anticipate the result of an action and make adjustments accordingly? Do they stop and reread when they lose track? Do they stay on topic while writing? And do they review their work and edit mistakes? This is called metacognition. This is the highest order executive function. So this is the idea or the ability to stand back and take a bird's eye view of oneself in a situation. It's the idea of thinking about one's thinking. This is the ability to observe how you problem solve, your ability to make connections. This includes self-monitoring and self-evaluative skills. So if you look in the gray bubble, you'll see it says, how am I doing? How'd I do? So for young kids, they should be able to change their behavior in response to feedback from an adult. So it's not quite coming from them yet. But a teenager should be able to monitor and critique their performance and improve it by watching others who are more skilled. They should check over their work and monitor their grades and think, how am I doing overall? Okay, so those are all the executive function skills. Now we're going to talk about briefly just some of the symptoms and educational implications of trauma. So trauma actually causes changes to the structure of the brain. Trauma decreases flexibility. It interferes with problem solving. Sometimes it includes physical reactions like headache, stomach ache, dizziness, or discomfort in another part of the body. It also causes problems with sleep. The severity and persistence of symptoms vary greatly among children who are affected by PTSD. Symptoms may come and go for no apparent reason, and a child's mood may change drastically. So these things obviously come into play during school, and the variability of symptoms and the behaviors can be unpredictable, which makes it difficult for teachers to respond with helpful interventions. So children can regress or act younger than their age, which can lead to further emotional and behavioral problems. So they become clingy or whiny, impatient, impulsive, aggressive. They have difficulty performing skills, even just the most basic functions that could include talking. Their capacity for learning may be decreased. They have difficulty concentrating. They become preoccupied and easily confused. They lose interest in activities that maybe they once had a lot of interest in. They become quiet or sad. They avoid interaction with other children, and sometimes they even fall asleep in class. So the first idea is to provide a consistent, predictable routine with movement and mindfulness, if possible. A regular pattern will help reestablish and maintain a sense of security and normalcy in a child's life. If a schedule needs to change, it's important to tell children ahead of time what will be different and why. So if you don't tell them, you may notice that they become anxious if things are not consistent. So it could seem to the teacher or to the child, that the teacher's disorganized or confused, and this may kind of stress them out. It's also important, if possible, to incorporate large muscle activities into the day. So including short breaks, even for just jumping or stretching, and obviously recess time. And then to incorporate mindfulness activities. It can just be a few seconds of breathing or mindful body scan exercises, mindful grounding exercises, thinking about their senses. So on the right, you'll see an example of a poster where there are coping techniques. So the student should think about 5 things they see around themselves, 4 things that they can touch, 3 things they can hear, 2 things they can smell around them, and 1 thing that they can taste. So this is a type of a grounding activity or a coping technique. In general, it's helpful to have structure and post visuals or provide them to students in the classroom, like a writing checklist that you'll see right in the middle where it says call the cops. This helps them remember to capitalize their writing, organize their words correctly, punctuate, and check their spelling. It also helps with even behavioral aspects in the classroom, such as the poster that you'll see that says stop and think. This will help children who are maybe in a stressful situation where they may need to stop and think before they behave in a certain way. Think about how they're feeling and how they're going to proceed. It's also helpful to provide visuals of what their day is going to look like, and providing graphic organizers using different modalities, such as looking a student in their eye and having them repeat what. It's very helpful for all students and all individuals in general to have ways to plan, and providing students with structure, such as a table that lists what they need to do, and maybe they can estimate how long the project will take. That's really helpful, as well as having a calendar that they can write on, just a standard to-do list. And then also another thing that's really helpful is something that's called a Kanban board. I'll show you an example of what that is. So here's a couple of examples for Kanban boards. One you'll see can be done by just writing on a whiteboard, to do, doing, and done, and then using Post-it notes in different colors that maybe are coded for different classes or different projects or parts of a project. And the student would put Post-it notes for what they need to do and then move them over to the doing column. And when they're finished, they'd move them over to the done column, or they could just rip them up and feel good about that. Another way to do it is for each day of the week. So things that they need to do on Monday, if they don't do it, maybe they would move it over to Tuesday. So that's another way to do it on paper. And then there's also an example of a way that a student could do it online using a Kanban tool online, and they could enter the information digitally and move it around. Here are some examples of graphic organizers that teachers can provide to students that will help them with their writing, with taking notes, and planning papers or reports, brainstorming for stories. There are many ways you can use graphic organizers. So there are paper versions as well as versions that are online. And this is really helpful for students, especially those who don't think in a linear fashion. So if they just brainstorm and they have a whole bunch of thoughts, they can.
Stephanie, I think that slide might have cut off early. Was there anything you wanted to add about that one? I'm not sure.
Can you go back for 1 second? So
here are some examples.
Basically,
Yeah, sorry.
Basically, these are ways that students can approach organizing their information. And so teachers can provide them in the classroom to everyone, or students can make them on their own. I didn't actually put one in that a student had created, but on the right side, you'll see there's one that they created online. And so if a student doesn't think linearly, like in an outline format, they can put ideas in a non-linear way, sort of like thought bubbles, or just ideas that they add on as they're maybe writing ideas for writing a story, or they can do it for papers that they're researching. They can put things like this one is about, what was it, Jack London and White Fang. And so as they're researching, they can put information in, and it doesn't have to fit into a specific order right away. And so it's really just to get out thoughts and ideas and information in a way that's, you know, a visual way. I hope that helps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Organizers. Now let's consider homework.
Seems like this one isn't working.
It's really important for students to remember to bring home their homework. So it's really helpful to have colors and physical reminders, especially for younger students. And so this is an example of color-coded bracelets where students can color code each class. So say blue is science and red is math. And then they can put on their carabiners which homework assignments they need to do. So if they have science, they'd put on a blue bracelet. And if they have math, they would put a red bracelet on, or they could wear it. They could either put it on their backpack, on their carabiner, or they can just put it on their wrist. And then when they go to their locker, that would hopefully remind them to bring home their math and science homework. And then also it would help them bring them back to school if they see on their backpack that they have the red and blue carabiner, the bracelets hanging from their carabiner, then they should be reminded to check their backpack to be sure that they have the science and math materials that they need to return to school. It's really, really helpful for everyone, not just students, to use planners and organizers or calendars. And one thing that teachers can do is if students write their homework in a written planner, teachers can go around the classroom and check the planners and make sure that the students filled them in completely. And then some teachers like to stamp them at the bottom or initial them, which shows that they've been filled out completely and appropriately. So parents could even check. And this helps students get into the habit of filling them out daily. When filling out planners and organizers, people have various opinions on what works best for them. Some students prefer to do them on notebook planners, handwritten, and others like to do them in Google Calendar or in apps that they can also connect to their phone, as well as Google Calendar can do the same. But there are specific apps to help with organizing homework and studying, such as My Homework app. One of my students loves this app. Teachers really need to explicitly teach their students how to make homework plans. So this is an example of a table that students can fill out, which includes the tasks that they need to do, how long they think it will take. So this is helpful for time estimation. It should also, if possible, include when they will start and where they will do their work. This will help the students visualize or rehearse the task before even getting to it. So that will help them with remembering it. And another thing they can do is write their actual start and stop times, and that will help them figure out if they actually estimated correctly how long the activity would take. So if they estimated their math homework would take 30 minutes and they started at 4 o'clock, but then they didn't end till 5 o'clock, then they would see, oh, it actually took me 30 extra minutes than I had assumed. And then they can check it off when they're done, which often feels very good. Another thing they can do is put their assignments, obviously, into their assignment books or put alarms in their smartphones or reminders. And And here's another example of reminders. There's a whole bunch of pictures on here. Students can have reminders on their smartphones and their Apple Watches, and there's even specific watches that are created to help students remember things. The ones that are in black, blue, red, white, and pink have little comments that they include where they remind the student to pay attention, to slow down, to relax, to do their homework, and to focus. Something that's easy for young students to use is the cube on the bottom. It's a time cube, and if they plan to do something for 5 minutes, they can turn the cube over to the 5, and it will automatically turn on, and then it will turn off, or it will sound, sorry, at the 5-minute mark. There are various apps as well, such as the beeper app. And then on the right, you'll see one of my students likes to do this, so she'll really see her reminder. She takes her phone and takes a picture of something she's written down, like on a sticky note. So here's an example of finish math and email Mrs. B about the retake. So she'll take a picture and she'll put it on her lock screen, which I just love. This is an example of students. This is an example of how teachers should really chunk up assignments. So having students start with, just writing the introduction to a paper, only assigning that, not just assigning the entire project at once, but teach them how to do a long-term project. So giving them the introduction to do first, and then having them write the body paragraphs, specifically telling them what they should entail, and then having them write the conclusion. So this is a less overwhelming way of planning and organizing and estimating the amount of time it will take to write a complete paper. Teachers should teach students, since they often don't, how to take notes and how to use active reading strategies, which, taking notes is a really difficult endeavor. And so if teachers can provide students with what's called closed notes, where during the lectures, the students only have to fill out part of the notes instead of having to remember everything the teacher says and write it down while listening to the next thing the teacher says, if they can just write in the key information on the blanks, that really helps students. Or providing them with other types of graphic organizers would also be helpful. And then with reading, helping them use approaches like writing on sticky notes for annotating, or using highlighters and underlining key information. So all those things that will help students in school, but teachers don't typically teach them. Another thing teachers can do is help kids with organizing their binders and papers, having one folder for each class and making sure they have the paper and other materials that they need. Something that one teacher does, well, I'm sure more teachers than one do this, but this is one example of how a teacher can consistently monitor and assess student organization. So this can be done even on a classroom level, where the students gain points or can earn points by doing each of the criteria. So if they write their due dates at the top of all their assignments, they get a point. If they don't stuff all their papers into their notebooks, they get another point. So everything that needs to be done in terms of executive functioning, in terms of organization, the students will get points for, and then at a certain point that's pre-specified, the class can have a reward, such as, maybe a little party, or a day where they don't have to wear their uniform, or something like that, something to look forward to. It's also really helpful to increase accessibility for students, not just those with learning challenges, but also just for students in general. But these are things that can be added to 504s and IEPs. So providing a scribe for a child who may have difficulty with writing, reading a document aloud so a student can hear, see, and edit their errors, providing them with speech to text and text to speech software, as well as spell check and programs like Grammarly, which check grammar, and then providing audible versions of books that they can read along with the hard copies. Now, I'm going to get into some examples of things that are ideal for trauma victims' classrooms. So something that is ideal would be to adjust the environment. So these are things that are not just helpful for victims of trauma, but good for everyone. So kids notice how people are looking at them. They have a threat perception. So it's important to try to keep them calm and avoid triggers. So greeting them warmly each day and making eye contact will let students know that he or she are valued and that you care. You can also make a big impact on a child by what you say or don't say. And how a child perceives themselves often comes from the action of others. So attempt to control or eliminate situations that might trigger strong emotions, establish a feeling of safety, even arranging the room in a way that's easy to move through is really helpful. And providing options for where a student can be in a quiet space or, where the more noisy activities are going on. Arrangements can also be made that will allow for recuperative timeout in the classroom. So one classroom actually that I heard of had a giant refrigerator box. It was a kindergarten classroom that had a blanket in there. This probably wouldn't be ideal for older students because they'd be made fun of, but some place that students can feel comfortable and kind of in their own little cocoon where they're not going to be bothered. So you'll see an example of a tent or a cushiony chair with a pillow and even some fidgets. So teachers should really understand that regression is due to something that was a dramatic trigger to a child, and that kids may suddenly go into a survival mode. So they should acknowledge when a child is triggered. They may see them either go into a flight, fright, or freeze mode. Those are 3 possible ways kids can react, and ask them something like, can you get it together? And if not, maybe they can allow them to have a flash pass or a fast pass where they can go to a place that's pre-designated as a safe space. So go to the nurse's office or a counselor's office. And then if they leave, the child should learn to use coping mechanisms so they can get back into the classroom as soon as they can. So helping them calm down, identify triggers, and learn how to de-escalate their behaviors. So this part is focused on response inhibition and emotional control. So helping children think before they act. And this is another example of providing visuals. So having the classroom rules posted on the wall. Providing sticky notes, maybe if a student tends to interrupt, maybe giving them some sticky notes and have them write things down that come to mind and then share them later. Or even using a nonsense word to cue self-control. So if a student is starting to get worked up, maybe having kind of a cue that will remind them to try to think about their behavior and maybe try to calm down. Or even having not a word, just a thumb on their chest. The teacher puts their thumb on. This could be helpful for the whole classroom where the teacher will, or they can provide a When children are negatively affected by abuse or difficult home situations, emotional control is the hardest to fix. So if teachers can teach coping strategies and repeat them until they're internalized, that's really helpful. So they can use things such as a butterfly hug, where all the students could do this in a classroom where they hug themselves and maybe provide affirmation to themselves, like coming up with a mantra like, I can get myself back on track as soon as I can. So using coping strategies, also using mindfulness meditation, having the reminder to have a growth mindset, using programs like Social Pragmatics, or self-talk, like if I feel this, then I will do that. So planning that ahead of time. This is an example of the zones of regulation where a student can, this can be posted even in that safe space in the classroom, where a student can think about what zone they're in and what they're going to be able to do in that zone to bring themselves back to a comfortable place. So blue would be if they were feeling sick or sad, all the way to red if they're angry or mad. And some classrooms have 5 zones. This is an example of 4 zones. On the left side, you'll see there's a hard times board. And this shows that sort of a reminder if I become triggered. Sometimes I get upset when I hear loud noises such as a friend crying or a vacuum cleaner. And then it has things that the child can't do. So when I'm upset, I can't throw things or hurt other people, but I can listen to music or read a book. So it gives them options for their behaviors. Another thing that can be done for victims of trauma is to identify what will help them calm down. So it can either be, or to offer comfort. So it could be finding a peer that they can help, who can help them during the school day to provide support, or even have them see after school. And if not a peer, even just something to hold. Some kids like pulling strings on koosh balls or feeling rabbit's feet, having something in their desk that they can grab and hang on to when they're feeling uncomfortable. And this is just another example of something that could be, it's not always easy, but to be included in an IEP for some trauma victims is to have art or music therapy. So just to wrap it up, here are some resources like the book I mentioned, Smart But Scattered, and there are also other books as well as YouTube videos and Facebook groups that people can join to get more ideas about executive function in school. And just as I presented throughout my talk, I have a list of devices and apps that you can look into that will help students with their planning and their time management and even with reading. So I just want to thank you very much for having me tonight, and here's my contact information. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize about the recording. I hope that it still made its point. And also, I wanted to say I'm glad I managed to stay on, but at the same time, there's huge booms outside my window. My internet worked, but now we have fireworks going on. So anyway, I'm not sure what's going on with that. But thank you, everyone. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, no, Stephanie, that was so helpful because so many times for our kids, I can identify what the needs are, or I hate to use the word deficits, but sometimes I'm at a loss for how to help support a student. And if the school also feels at a loss to know how to support the child, or feels like, well, they should already have those skills, what do I need to do about it? So it's just really, you gave so many very specific, concrete examples of resources. So this is wonderful when my brain is stuck in the future.